everyone, and welcome to Ammo Art Chat. My name is Linda Sisler, and I want to welcome you all to the show as well as to 2013. So this is our first show of the year, so Happy New Year to everyone. Hope everything's going well for you so far, and we're all very, very excited tonight. We have Quang Ho with us. We're going to talk about the evolution of seeing, and I can't tell you how excited we are. I met Quang in Indianapolis when he was at the American Impressionist Society and had the opportunity to talk with him there, and it was a lot of fun, and I think we're going to have a lot of fun this evening on the show as well. Just wanted to quickly mention that in our next show, that would be in February, the third Thursday, we're going to have Ken Bacchus on the show, and I need to talk with Ken actually to nail down what it is we're going to be talking about, but one of the things that I know that Ken was interested in talking about is finding our own voice in our paintings and how that might be accomplished. So we'll probably slide that in on that show as well, and whatever else Ken wants to talk to us about. And then in March, on the third Thursday, we'll be talking with Jennifer McChristian. So just wanted to let you know that those two shows are coming up in the future. The other announcements that we have, I wanted to, if you guys are on our newsletter, then you already know that the Ammo Painting Challenge for January has been posted. It runs until February 7th, and we're sticking with the theme of seeing as an artist and pushing our ability to see. The challenge is basically to paint a all-white painting. So what we're doing is challenging you to see the colors that lay in the shadow area, and depending on what your source light is, whether that's natural light or a cool light or a warm light, you may even find, if you really push yourself to see colors in the light area. I've seen a number of paintings, I think that Quan has done, that have been white on white, that are absolutely beautiful. And so this is the theme that we've got going on for the painting challenge, and our challenge is on Facebook now. So if you're on Facebook, I invite you to find us. It's the Ammo Painting Challenge, and ask to join the group. And I'll be glad to accept your invitation and get you started with those challenges. And then you've also may seen a recent blog that we did asking you to talk to us and post a comment after the blog about what your goals are for 2013, what the things are that you're going to be challenging yourself to accomplish in 2013. And I invite you to read the blog and also to participate in that. So hopefully we can get a community of artists together that will be very, very supportive of one another so that we can achieve those goals. So if you have not signed up for the newsletter, you can do that out at the Artist Mentors Online website. It's artistmentorsonline.com. And where you would sign up for that newsletter is in the upper right-hand column, and it's a free newsletter, so I invite you guys to do that. And if you want, you can actually follow us on Blog Talk Radio. Up towards the left at the top, you'll see a little follow button, and Blanche and Barbara and I would greatly appreciate it if you did follow us. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I had sent out to Quang and to Barbara and Blanche yesterday that we were one of the staff picks, so wanted to thank Blog Talk Radio for featuring us tonight as well. And with that, what I want to do now is bring in our co-hosts. Both Barbara and Blanche are with us tonight. Say hello to Blanche first. I understand, Blanche, you might have some snow coming in.
Yeah, anytime now. And I live in North Carolina, so you know my children are thrilled at the prospect of snow. Yeah, they're hoping.
Yeah.
But, yeah, how have you been?
I've been doing well. I was just thinking, if you're going to have snow tomorrow, you can do a white-on-white painting, enter it in the challenge.
Well, when you were talking about that, I thought about that, the beautiful shadows on the snow and so forth. We'll hope we have enough here.
Yeah,
otherwise,
you can also paint through windows. So.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
You won't have to freeze. Okay. So I also want to quickly bring in Barbara Coleman. Hi, Barbara. How are you doing?
Hi, Linda. I'm doing well, and I'm very excited about this show with Quang. Quang, I don't know if you know this, but when I met you at the OPA National show that you judged at Evergreen, you afforded me one of the high points of my life by awarding my painting the Seascape Award of Excellence. And after each award, Quang gave a critique of the painting and how he had seen it. And I have to say, after I heard my name, I don't remember a thing you said about that painting. I missed my big chance at the critique. I can't remember a thing. I was just in shock. But I wanted to thank you for that.
Well, I have to tell you, Barbara, I don't remember anybody's names of the awards that I give to, because I try to not look at the names. So I just read. I just, once I give out the award, I write down the name afterwards, and then I give it out. But I didn't even know that you were the one I'm talking to tonight, so I've given that award to. That's
yeah.
I'm glad to hear that.
Well, I was just, you're one of my heroes in the art world, and so to get that award from you just, was literally one of the high points of my life. And my husband and daughter were with me, and it was just this amazing experience. But I wish I could remember what you said beyond it was a high-key painting, that, and I don't remember the rest.
Well, you put me on the spot now, because I can't even remember yesterday, so. But I said what I meant.
Well, it was thank you very, very much. It was a really big deal in my life.
Congratulations. I'm glad to have been able to give it to you. That's great.
Yeah.
And I'm absolutely great. Glad, happy to be here. I'm really liking the concept of this talk. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we're excited to have you here as well. We've got, from what I've been seeing and hearing, we have a lot of international listeners as well as those that are based in here in North America. So what I'd like to do, and especially since we're being featured tonight, is go ahead, Quang, and read a little bit about your bio, if I can, just so that we can. I'm sure the majority of folks that are listening in know you, but for those who don't, Quang was born in Vietnam, and he immigrated to the United States in 1975 and is now a U.S. citizen. His artistic interest began at an early age of 3 and continued through his schooling, led him to an exciting and successful painting career. In 1980, at age 16, Quang held his first one-man show at Tomorrow's Masters Gallery in Denver, Colorado, and the exhibit was a smashing success. In 1982, Quang attended the Colorado Institute of Art, and he graduated from the CIA, not the Central Intelligence Agency, which when I read that the first time, I kind of like, the CIA, what? But anyway, he graduated in 1985 with the Best Portfolio Award for his graduating class. In 1982, Quang's mother was killed in a tragic auto accident, leaving him with the responsibility of raising 4 younger brothers and a 6-year-old sister, who I saw on your Facebook page. You walked down the aisle a year ago, and now they have a baby. So you've got some more, as we can say, fuel for paintings coming up with that one. And then after graduating from art school, he launched a very successful career as a freelance illustrator from 1985 to 1991, and his clients included the Adolph Coors Company, Upjohn, Safeway, the Colorado Symphony, and the Chicago Symphony. And today you work mostly in oils, occasionally in watercolor and pastels. And his subject matter ranges from still life, landscapes, interiors, and figurative. And then there's a quote that I read off your website, which I absolutely love. It says, quote by Quang, naturally, "Subject matter is not really important to me. I can find a visual excitement all around me as well as on the canvas, from a knot on a tree to the graceful limp of a flower wilting to a juxtaposition, of a few simple shapes and colors. Inspirations are inexhaustible." So tonight we're going to be talking about the evolution of seeing, and both how past masters have seen, which Quang will give us his input or his information and on that, as well as our own evolution of seeing and our progress through our work and years. So welcome, Quang, and thank you for joining us.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here. It's a subject that is really, I think the utmost importance really in my development as an artist. So I pretty much what I've thought about for 30-something years as an artist. So it would be fun to dive into and see if we can clarify, because this is what I talk about when I teach a workshop. essentially when I'm teaching a workshop, I'm not interested in showing anybody how I paint, and I've never done that. I'm only interested in a way of seeing, but how I see everything and how I've evolved in seeing. And so, we can go into that at any point.
Yeah, and I think actually a lot of the fuel for the questions that we came up with and things like that came from our conversation. We kind of had this conversation in Indy about seeing in Indianapolis, about seeing and how different people see different things, and so that kind of led to us doing the show and actually the topic of the show too. So I'm going to go ahead and throw it over to Blanche to ask you the first question.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'd like to include a quote about J.M.W. Turner made by John Ruskin, who was an early defender of Turner's work. The quote is from his book, Modern Painters. Ruskin's opinion was that Turner's work enabled us to see the world in a whole new way. And here's the quote. The whole effect of painting from the technical viewpoint is based on our ability to acquire, once again, that state one would call the innocence of the eye. In other words, the way of looking at things through a childlike manner, through which we perceive spots of color as such as their knowledge, without their knowledge of meaning, as a blind man would see them as if his sight were restored all of a sudden. Some people would say that Turner's work remains a puzzle today. What do you think of Ruskin's opinion? Any insights?
That quote is remarkable because when I give a talk today, I literally had an epiphany at one point that painting happens on 3 different levels, and the first level is about seeing based on our accumulated knowledge of what we think things look like. So it becomes a belief system. We assume an apple is red, for example, or a face has a nose, an ear, and an eye, and so when we draw a face in the early times, you try to put in an ear, an eye, and a nose the way that our mind thinks it ought to look like. But what he's talking about here is looking at a childlike state without that preconception. And I don't know if you remember, Linda, in my talk in Indianapolis, I talk about this experience I had reading the Helen Keller book when I was in my early 20s. At the time, I was just really searching for, philosophy and religion and truth and science. I devoured everything, just trying to find out the answer. And I remember finding this little book by Helen Keller, and, in it, she was dumb, deaf, and blind until she was dumb, deaf, and blind, period. And at the age of 9, her teacher poured water over her hand and kept, signing the word water until she understood that concept. Well, think about that. Before that one recognition, she couldn't hear, she couldn't speak, she couldn't see, so she had no words in her mind at all. We sit around, we think, and we contemplate all kinds of things. But she said that up to that point, she was like an animal. She would bump into a wall and yelp. This is a really important point. This is not only just art, but philosophically, it's really beautiful. So she would bump into a wall and yelp like an animal. And then she'd bump into the same wall 5 minutes later and react exactly the same way. There's no power of deduction at all in her. There was no words to use. But she said that when the word water she finally understood that signing and the water pouring on her hand meant water. She said she felt another mind touching her mind, and a light went on in her head. I mean, when I read that, I had goosebumps, And and I was practicing learning about meditation, which is all about letting go of not letting go necessarily, but becoming aware of your thoughts and being separated from the stream of your thoughts and not get sucked into it and drown in it, but to be aware of it. And when I read that account, it was like, this is as pure of a meditation experience as anybody can ever hope for, because here's pure awareness without all the verbal baggage that comes with what we have, So as a painter, interestingly enough, learning to see as a painter means wading through all of that baggage before you can understand what you see. And when you take workshops, you hear this over and over, that squint and see the big masses. Well, what that simply means is seeing past all the little assumptions, little details, and see the whole of everything. Well, about a few years ago, maybe 5-6 years ago, it didn't occur to me back then, but it occurred to me what would happen if Helen Keller at that point, after learning only the word water, could open her eyes, you see, and look at the world. She would look at the world without any preconception about anything. So she wouldn't know what a tree is. She wouldn't know what a face is. She wouldn't know what a mountain is. She wouldn't know how that distance. She wouldn't even know that, that hill is in the distance. She would only see shapes, values, color, texture as purely abstract relationships. And that's what I realized my entire career as an artist was learning to get back to. I was going back to that, not learning to see better, but what, in essence, seeing better, learning to see better is about learning how to get back to that Helen Keller state. And what Ruskin is saying about Turner is exactly the same thing. You see, he said pretty much the same thing.
That's an amazing concept. Yeah.
Isn't it? Well.
Yeah, that is. That's just amazing when you think about it. Trying to lose the words for apple, or when you look at the shape, don't think of apple, just think of the shape or the apple and what's beside it, making one large shape.
Yeah.
That's an amazing concept.
If you didn't have an idea of the apple to begin with, well, you wouldn't have that trouble, you see. But that's not how we're made. We were made to look at something, outline it, fill it in, and then go to the next thing. So our mind has an amazing way of disintegrating everything, and that's how the world operates. But that is not truthful at all. That's very that is a defense mechanism, I suppose, if you talk about evolution and all that. But it's really, as an artist, it becomes real obvious that that's not true at all. That's not how visions work. So just thinking about the Helen Keller thing should help you if you pretend like you're Helen Keller when you get out there and paint a landscape the next time, just you won't you'll see that everything's connected. That don't say that there's a sky and there's a tree and there's a mountain, or even try to listen to what you would know about that sort of thing, but to just sit quietly without any preconceptions and really look at it, and you see how simple the whole thing is. It's very interesting.
It is interesting too. 1 second, Blanche. I just want to jump in here real quick.
Go ahead.
I had a discussion with I have a 6-year-old niece who's very interested. Actually, when my grandniece actually, when my niece, her mother asked her what she wanted to be, she said she wanted to be an artist. And Allison said to me, that has to come from you. So when I was down there and visiting them over Christmas, she wanted me to come upstairs and color with her, which we did. And I was talking with her, and I just wanted to see how much of her schooling was already affecting her sight. So I asked her some questions, and I said, what color is a tree trunk? And she came back and said brown. And I said, what color is the tree, the leaves? Well, if it's summer, it's green. And just she was already being programmed, if you will, like we all were, that tree trunks are brown, leaves are green. And I said, I want you to do me a favor. If you really want to be an artist, don't listen to people. You figure out what color it is.
There you go.
And she just kind of sat there and looked at me with this real quizzical look, and I thought, I hope in about 2 years she realizes what I was saying to her, that just to unlearn everything that we've been taught is a hard thing to do.
Yes, it is.
You might really enjoy the book called My Stroke of Insight by Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor.
Yeah.
She was a brain scientist who. Have you read it?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that resonates very well with what you said earlier about Helen Keller, of just, we have a left brain that deals with future and past and analyzing and cataloging our experiences and the details upon details upon details of everything. And then the right side of the brain is able to be in the present moment and see that everything is all one and connected. And that's the part that it's when you can see like that when you're painting or even experiencing anything is a whole different universe than day-to-day life, kind of with that analytical mindset that tells you that leaves are green and tree trunks are brown. It's what we've already learned.
Right. Well, I my sister sent me a TED Talks of Jill. Is it her name?
Yes, Jill Goldsey Taylor. Yes.
Yeah, and she it's on the TED Talks, and if you look it up, it is worth seeing. It's really moving. She had the stroke, and she was watching herself go through it, and then the body just fails her, but her mind was clear enough to see what was going on. It's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But essentially, it is as for me the whole question of basically how to be a painter. What does it mean to be a painter? How to get better at art, how to get better at doing my craft is so parallel to finding what is meaningful or truthful in life. And what I've found, to a point where there's no doubt about it in my mind now, is that belief is the only thing that is not true. We can essentially believe that the apple is red, and that we assume with it becomes assumptions, that trees are brown and leaves are green. But when you know the truth, when you understand something about what's true, you don't have to hang on to rules. You just know it's true. And so in essence, what this little girl is learning about art, she's being taught these things, is no different than somebody who reads a book, and I confront this in every workshop. There are so many accomplished artists who still think about how, everything in the back has to be cooler and lighter, everything in the front has to be warmer and so on. But that's not true at all. That is that's just the principle of what happens in an atmospheric condition. When things are further away, there's atmosphere that fall in between, and the atmosphere actually makes that feel lighter, and then that with the sky infusing into the atmosphere, which is coolish, will make it look. But on a day without atmosphere, and if you're not interested in atmosphere in your painting, then that goes out the window. So those rules are just to help you. It should that kind of principle shouldn't be taught as a rule. It should be taught as like, look, this is what happens when this happens. But when it becomes a rule, it creates all kinds of restriction and fear in an artist. And I've talked to artists who will paint the still life, and they're painting the edge of the front of the table to the 2-foot edge behind the table, and they're trying to make it cooler back there and warmer up front, which is crazy. You see what I mean? But they're hanging on to this rule rather than understanding what it is. And that's part of the learning to see is I think that Helen Keller thing is so wonderful, because it makes you stop all of that process of fear and assumption, and you stop and quietly look and see what's going on.
Yeah, really, and you can really see instead of your mind telling you what you're seeing. Yesterday I was rewatching your nuts and bolts video, and you were talking about first level, second level, and third level of a painter or of seeing. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yes, I'd be happy to. I will try. This is an epiphany that I had when I was teaching maybe 15, 20 years ago. I used to teach a class in Denver, and I took a whole group of artists, 20 of them, and we started. It's a whole year-long class. We meet every Friday, and I would break it down like a scientist, Like with first month, we would get into lines and then get into shapes and then color and value and so on. But I remember one morning I was getting ready to go into class, and I was brushing my teeth and trying to figure out what to do for that day. And it was like, how you sometimes have an aha, like kind of light bulb. It all happens all at once. It happened. I know it would happen all at once, because if I sat down and thought about it, it would take too long. It took time, but this was instantaneous. That painting happens on 3 different levels in this sense. The first level is based on our assumption and our belief as to what the world looks like, and what, and again, the example of the apple in the face and so on. So as an artist, let's say tomorrow you want to become an artist, so you don't have any idea what that involves, but you thought if you can learn to draw well enough so the face looks like a face according to what you think it looks like, or a tree, if I can get that tree to look like a tree according to what your brain says, which is the leaves are green, and I mean, how many of us have done those paintings where we can't make that correct brown, So you see everything, you process it through this projected belief of what the world looks like, and artists were stuck on that for a long time, and you can be very good at rendering, an apple, so it has all the appleness that you think an apple ought to have, or the skin tone will glisten with sweat, and the whole thing. You could be very good at all of that, but you're still in the first level, which is based on what you think it should look like. The second level is like this: is if you're holding that apple, which is red, for example, one day, and then you put it next to a red cloth, and all of a sudden the apple disappears. Then what? You see? Then what happens is what happens on the second level is that artists realize that, when I look out at the world, I'm seeing relationships of shapes, values, color, texture, edges, contrast, that sort of thing, and they're all. That's really the vocabulary that we're using as painters. So when we get onto the canvas, the second level is about exploring what happens when you put two values together, or two shapes together, or two colors together. Is there a sense to all of that? And there is, of course, in the same manner that when you listen to Beethoven, you don't know what he's writing about, but his vocabulary is A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and the flats and the sharps. And yet, just from those elements, you have the Fifth Symphony and the Emperor's Concerto, and on and on and on. It's just endless. And so, with the second level of painting, you are using those. You're orchestrating, harmonizing, using line, shapes, value, color, texture, and edges. Now, whether it looks like something representational, or whether it represents something like life, or it's purely abstract and it comes together beautifully, it's the same to me. It's really because you can paint something realistic and not understand those elements and how they work together, and you're just rendering according to the first level. Or you can look at the same scene and see that it just values color, shapes, texture, and edges, and take that set of circumstances and transpose it onto the canvas using, again, line, shapes, value, color, texture, and edges, and becomes art, whereas the rendering somehow becomes so personal. And for me, an interesting thing about belief is that how is it that one person can believe in something so strongly and nobody else around him will feel that at all? You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. That's the pretty much universal agreement about belief, is that it's purely personal. But with great work of art, there's something beautiful and universal about it, and that's because it transcends that first level. So when I talk about the second level, it has a sense of understanding, and if you think about art history, let's go back just a little bit about seeing how it developed from the age of the cavemen. When you wake up in the morning, the first thing you think about is food and shelter, and food was the animal, and so that was the utmost important thing in their mind. That's all they knew, was just going after that. But by the time the Greek came along, and the Greek art they didn't understand painting at all, but they could make beautiful forms that conform to the body. They could sculpt and they carved these incredible sculptures, not based on composition at all, but based on the beauty of the human body as idealized, which is another form of belief. And again, you could make some beauty, but it wasn't an art movement. And then of course, the Egyptian art was about gods and religious things, And it went all the way through the Renaissance, and that's when they started to go into perspective and form, and Rembrandt was painting light and shadow, and that finally became a visual concept. And then by the time the Impressionists came along, they were painting with color for its own sake. They saw color as color. And Monet was starting to paint, instead of a landscape, he was seeing the landscape as colors. And at first, the public was like, "Look, that's not how things look." You know, they didn't get it. You know, it's like, these guys are no good. That's not how things look. But it didn't take long for them to realize there was something really important happening here. And as soon as the Impressionists broke through that and understood that painting was about color and texture and brushstrokes and so on, then the modern movement took those elements and tried to do what they can do with that, without regards to the subject. Not all of it worked, but some of it did. And so if you look at it, all the great art movements have always happened on that second level, not on the first level, which is based on belief, but on the second level, where artists took those visual elements and tried to see what they could do, and in the process of doing that, they broke new ways of seeing. They did things, you know, it's like creating jazz or creating classical or creating rock and roll with these different ways of using these raw material. Does that make any sense?
Mm-hmm. Oh, it does. It's wonderfully put. I loved that video. I was, like I said, I was rewatching it yesterday, and it just turns your thinking around totally.
Oh, well, thank you. Now, you know, the interesting is the third level is the one. So the first level is based on assumption. The second level is based on asking whether it's true or isn't it true. You put your personal beliefs aside. So you're in there. You're really genuinely interested in asking the question: is it true or not? Do I have to paint that sky blue? What if I painted yellow blue or orange blue or maybe just yellow? There's a terrific painting of Van Gogh's at the Cincinnati Art Museum, Linda, where it's the woods and a couple figures walking through, and the tree trunks are purple, and it works beautifully. It's so cool.
Yeah.
And that painting was just in Denver for the Van Gogh show, and I was laughing because I had just talked to somebody about these three different levels and how trees have to be brown, and there's this painting with the purple tree trunks. But so you're in. So when I'm in my studio, I can always rely on work. I'm like a mad scientist in my studio, working out these different visual problems. So that's why I can do a white on white one day, or I wonder what would happen if I did a black on white, or a brown on white, or a brown on light brown, or what, you know, or a painting without any edges at all. Or I did a painting last night from a live model with a group of painters, and I've never done this before, where I, instead of laying the brush down the way I normally do, I was actually pushing the paint into the canvas and then pulling the brush directly off. I did the whole painting that way, and it was really interesting how it turned out. It actually turned out pretty well.
Yeah.
But so I'm always, you know, testing these theories out. Can I do this? Can I do that? And each idea will breed 10 other ideas until where I hate to go to sleep anymore because I'm so excited about painting, and I don't have enough time to get to it, you know?
You never get painter's block, do you?
No, that is never going to be an issue. You can take any one subject matter and turn it into a game, a beautiful visual game, you know, and if you're working on the second level like that, it's just endless, you know. But my latest thing is to actually, it's kind of a crazy Zen thing where the last 5 years I've done paintings where I do the whole thing and then scrape the whole thing off, and then rework into it and then scrape it off. So it's the ultimate letting go experience, you know. And but in the process, beautiful things happen. Beautiful stuff happens. So
the reason why I was chuckling is you guys weren't in Indy when but Quang was up on the stage, and he was painting his painting, and he took his palette knife and he scraped it all off, and there was a collective from the audience.
Oh, yeah.
Why?
It's hard to let go when you've done something good.
Well, that one's easy because it wasn't that good. but
we're doing it from memory. I thought it was pretty good.
Well, I actually try to do that when a painting is actually working. That's when it's freaky.
Oh, I bet.
But
what's the third level?
Well, that leads perfectly onto the third level, because that third level is what I realize is it's the intuitive, spiritual, which whenever I use that word, it sounds so funny because it sounds a little foofy, you know, but it really is that intuitive. The best way to describe it to me is when I'm there, there's no fear and there's no ego. There's not the me there, and it's really you're just all of a sudden you're in this place where there's no, you just go. And of course, little kids are there all the time. It's called a zone when you're in a sports, when you're a sport athlete, or if you're a writer or a musician. They all have this experience once in a while where you forget yourself, and even if you're a blank beginner artist, you can get in it. Or if you're a 3-year-old, you can get into it. And the 3-year-olds were more likely to get into it than any of us. And Van Gogh got into it all the time. But in the hands of a master who studied it for his whole lifetime, and he can forget all of that and get into that zone, then beautiful things happen. And I think it, philosophically, I think it speaks more of our fear, more so than anything, because I believe that level is there all the time. That's great. To me, that's great. It's there all the time. But we're not tapped into it because we as human beings live on the first level, which is full of fear and anxieties and rules and preconceptions and assumptions, you know. So that third level, you know, it doesn't happen very often, because even when as Zen as I try to be, I'm still trying. And so it's, you know, you can try to be Zen, but if you're trying, you're still trying. And so it's this beautiful thing that happens once in a while when I don't try at all, but I'm there fully, and then it happens. So
there's a very beautiful thing I read in a book, and I hope the title of the book comes back to me, but it was just a quick story of an artist talking about studio ghosts. And he said when he starts to paint, you know, there's just, the room is full of people, not physically, but the room is full of people. This teacher has this opinion about how a painting should go, and this gallery likes to sell this type of work or this subject matter, and, you know, my husband or my wife likes this, and so likes that. And he says, one by one, they leave the room. And he says, and finally, I leave the room too, and then I'm really painting.
I love that. That's cool. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I usually, I don't leave often enough. No, that's exactly the point. You know, and that's a fun point, because with painting, there's a struggle to just master the craft of painting, of learning how to mix color, how to draw really well. I mean, if you can't draw well, you can't do anything. So you have to have absolute full command of your drawing, where you're able to do anything at any point, and the more fluent you are at that, the better chance of being a great artist you have. Yeah. But if you can't do that, there's the whole lifelong struggle of that. But then there's the collective scene, which, if you look at art history, it's taken. We have the benefit of all of these, the Impressionists and the Renaissance people and the abstract expressionists and Van Gogh and everybody. We have the benefit of all of that osmosis and evolution of seeing as a collective whole. Now we have all of that, so we don't have to struggle through that anymore. And with all the DVDs and workshops that people can take, it's a wonderful place to be as an artist right now to learn, I think.
Yeah.
But it still requires, to be good at it. It still requires some very genuine looking and and some clear thinking to be a really good artist. And I see this when I teach workshops. I can tell you the number one thing that I see artists make mistakes that I see all the time is because of all these preconceptions of what things should be or how all these rules about painting. I hear artists say, "I'm afraid if I do this, it'll do this to the painting. Well, I'm afraid to put that thing too close to the edge, or I'm afraid to make that thing too dark." And I hear that all the time. And that, just hearing somebody say that, I know they're in trouble already, because they won't be able to, they're not really looking when they're saying that. They're just following that first level assumptions again. And you assume that if you do this, because you read this somewhere, that if you did it, you're not following the rules. So that's the number one killer to an artist is that word, "I'm afraid if." And I say, if you're afraid of it, that's the first thing you should do. Put that tree right next to the edge. Make that sky as dark as you want to. Whatever you got to find out. And to the, I even say, if you make a decision, it's always correct as a painter. But you have to make the decision and follow through with it. And because if you stand there and you're frozen in fear, nothing will happen anyway, and you're going to go home frustrated. But if you make a decision, it's always your decision, and you can change that decision. You can. I do that all the time when I'm painting. I'll take things out, put things in, change values, and it took me a long time to get to the point where I have the courage to do that. And once you do it once or twice, you realize, well, that didn't hurt at all.
Oh, yeah. I was watching another one of your DVDs a while back, and I think you were doing a still life, and you had looked at it overnight, I think, and come back to it and said, and you took some things out, I believe, that looks wonderful, that most people wouldn't have wanted to take out, but it changed the composition.
Oh, yes, I do remember that. Yeah, that's I had produced the 3 DVDs. One is painting the still life with light and shadow. So I took the whole process of setting it up and going through, and then and so that was a one take. It was just one day, and then the next day I went back and do that. And I still change things around. Sometimes I have a painting sitting around for. I just sold a big one, 48 by 48. That sat around for 8 months, and it was a winter landscape. I just kept building and building and building, and taking things out, changing the value of the snow altogether. But I think that's perfectly good to do, because once I make a decision about the change, it's like, I wonder what it would look like if I did that, and that's all it is, And sometimes, most of the times, it's a wondering if what will happen, rather than saying, I know that if I did this, that's going to change. That would be no fun anymore after that. So I have to find out what will happen if I did it, So in the case of the still life, I had gone in and I realized I had made a few things equal on spacing. When 2 spaces are the same in the painting, it really bugs me. So I just saw that, so I changed that.
Well, that DVD changed my way of looking at things. After looking at that, I would look at my mantelpiece and think, oh no, I have to rearrange that.
Oh, really?
I learned a lot from that. I did. I started seeing tabletops differently, and I love that. That's a wonderful DVD.
Oh my gosh, maybe I've overdone it. Well, I'm delighted to hear that, actually.
Yeah.
Sometimes as a painter, sometimes you can go along just kind of trying this, trying that, and then all of a sudden you'll see something somebody do or hear something someone says, and in an instant it changes everything. And, that's part of the fun.
I learned a lot about composition.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
I
think that is for everyone.
Yeah. Now, composition is here's a little secret for me. This is where painting is for me. I'll know now in 5 minutes into the painting whether that I can work for 5 months on this painting and it'll be just fine, or I can work another 5 months and it would not work. And it's because something about the structure and the composition before all the details go down is beautiful. There's something elegant about the proportions of how things are fitting together even before you tell the story. So it's like, I suppose it's like a writer waking up having an idea in their little head about a story, and they knew it was going to be good even before they know how to tell the story.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, so with the painting, I can block it in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and I'll know pretty much it's going to be fun to continue on with this, or it's going to be a bummer to carry on with this. And that has to do with the composition.
Yeah. I think it's always a struggle for me, composition. I've learned to do the thumbnails ahead of time and work it out so I don't get halfway through the painting and realize big mistakes that I've made in the composition.
Has that helped you a lot?
It does, because sometimes when you're painting, you can't see the whole of it. I'm probably painting on the first level, caught up on something and not seeing the whole of the painting, and then but if I had the thumbnail, I'd know that this shouldn't be centered, or that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think you work it out ahead of time. I think you just said it right there. It's that ability to see the whole thing. Whether you work a thumbnail, which is useful, or you can actually, while you're painting a big painting, you're constantly seeing the whole thing, and that's how I do it. I try to see the whole thing. I keep saying you got to pull your vision back so you can see the whole scene as you're painting, so you don't get locked in.
Oh yeah, that's a great way to think about it. Yeah, because you do tend to get concentrating on this area or that, and you're not seeing the forest for the trees. Yeah,
right. Well, I hope this is still in line with our talk about the evolution of seeing.
Well, I'll carry that further with about Turner again. That he stated he did not paint to be understood, but that he wished to show what a scene was like. And so Turner was painting in the first half of the 19th century, and Impressionism was in the second half of the 19th century. I think you've alluded to this already, but do you think Turner influenced Impressionism, possibly pushing how the upcoming Impressionists saw?
Well, there's no question about that. I think he was. I didn't know that quote, but after hearing that, there is no question in my mind that he influenced seeing in a great deal, in a great way, because his paintings have that quality of the totality of things, the atmosphere. Mm-hmm. He was definitely an atmospheric painter. And as painter, there's two kinds of painting. There's atmospheric painting and there's graphic painting. And he was totally atmospheric, and he saw the whole thing, the whole scene, whatever he's painting, swallowed up by a whole sheet of atmosphere, and that's how he affected everything. And I love that. I'm gonna have to go back and look at all his paintings all over again after hearing that quote.
Yeah.
I love that.
Well, and then when you talk about the evolution of seeing and Impressionism, you have to think of Monet. And Cézanne supposedly said of him, Monet is just an eye, but God, what an eye. So can you tell us your thoughts about Monet's work and his eye and how he saw things?
Absolutely. I had a terrific experience when I was in France teaching a workshop. I went to Paris, and there happened to be a retrospective of Monet's work. Now, Monet, from day one, middle of his life, he was an extremely competent painter, and to the point where he influenced even Sargent, who's one of the greatest virtuoso in painting. And his way of laying the paint down even influenced Sargent. But here's the interesting thing about Monet. He obviously, throughout his life, was developing, he was looking at a landscape, but he was not really, he looked at the landscape and saw how he could use paint to replicate that landscape. So he layered, he did all kinds of things. So it was always about the painting, and that's why it was so good. But when I saw this show, I kept gravitating to these really big paintings that were, these were around the time, or maybe even a little after the time of the giant water lily paintings that he had done. Mm-hmm. And they were just really bold brushstrokes and paint, and it was just flowing. There was one painting that was, I bet you it was about 8 feet by 8 feet, and from the top of the canvas to the bottom of the canvas, about 1.5 feet wide, is a tree trunk, just right down the middle of the canvas. And on either side are just brushstrokes coming down like flames and whispery things, and you realize he was painting the tree trunk of a willow, you know, and the leaves just became whispering brushstrokes. And there were 2 rooms or so of these big paintings, and I realized those were my favorite paintings of Monet. They were painting on a whole different. He transcended the landscape. What I thought was that here is this great painter, and he transcended the landscape. When he was painting these paintings, the landscape was just a reminder. Now he's fully orchestrating using lines, colors, shapes, texture, you know, values in its fullest glory. And then I realized when I look at all the dates, they were all done the 3 years prior to his death. I believe he died at 83 or 85, I can't remember. But they were all done between the age of 80 and 83. Even then, it's phenomenal. They're huge paintings, and they are, you know, it made perfect sense to me that he finally understood painting to its fullest extent at the age of 80 or so, and he was doing it. And they were amazing. And I'll tell you, when I was walking through, before I got to those paintings, after about 3 rooms of Monet's, you know, lines of poplars and haystacks, I started, to be honest with you, I was starting to walk through them really fast. because as wonderful as they were, there wasn't, you know, you see them, you know what they're going to be like. You know what I mean? They didn't hold my attention anymore. But these paintings were, each one of them knocked me upside my head. It was that incredible. I just couldn't, I couldn't walk away from them. And they're amazing. And it made me realize that, okay, if you understand something about this, you better get to it where you have the strength and not wait till you're 80 years old to do it.
And then it kicks down.
It's true. Quite marvelous. Quite marvelous. And that's I think another great example of all this, and just to sidetrack, is Van Gogh. We just had, the Denver Art Museum just had a show called, what is it called? Development of Van Gogh. Essentially, he did his entire body of work in 10 years. And the curator, Timothy Sandlin, who is a painter who could really appreciate this, brought the show to Denver, and it's been sold out. They opened it till midnight and 3 o'clock in the morning this last week because it was coming to an end. They sell those out too. It's great. And it's fantastic. But the paintings in there, he put it in the chronological order as when Van Gogh started and then when he died. And you'll see that he spent 7 years of doing really bad work. You know, because he was learning to be an artist. He's learning to see. And he thought, and when you're like a baby about learning, his early work is influenced by Millet, who's he's a light and shadow painter of the peasants in the fields, the late evening lights, and so on. So Van Gogh was inspired by that, but not having any idea what that meant. He tried his best to paint dramatic shadow and light in a very bad way, and then later on he painted still lifes for a number of years that were really bad. He didn't know what a background is. He didn't know how to see the whole painting together, you know. So he would paint this really competent still life in a vase, and then the background he just randomly fill it in with something. He didn't know how to do it. And then he saw the Japanese prints. And with the Japanese prints, the woodblock prints, that means there's no shadow, there's no light. It's just one color next to another color next to another color, representing that is what I call local tone painting. That is pure local tone painting, and that's what I describe in my nuts and bolts DVDs and so on. But once he understood that visual vocabulary, and the reason I say that is, again, to reiterate the point that he saw it on the second level. He got past the first level, which was assuming things needed to be form and shadow and light, and he was trying his best to do that. But when he saw the Japanese prints, he realized, oh my God, color next to another color next to another color could be beautiful. And from that point on, he took off like a rocket ship, because that became the structure for his painting to build his color and his paint, and he departed from shadow and light entirely altogether. And it was that clarity of visual intention that made him great. It's a very important point, because as an artist, you can go through your entire career getting better at rendering a landscape, but until you can describe it using visual vocabulary, you won't be an artist yet. It's an interesting point. And that's when he really developed his sense of color. He was, because the structure was so solid and simple that he could develop any kind of color structure on top of concepts on top of those structures. And that's why when I do a painting and I can do work however long on a painting and then scrape it off, I'm not afraid of it, because I know what my visual vocabulary and the structure I'm going after is, so I can never fall apart. It can change all it wants to, but it will never fall apart. You know what I mean?
Wow.
And the change is the fun part.
It is. I actually have gotten to the point where I will stand back and just say, what if I do this? And just stand back and explore, because to me it's the exploration that is becoming fun. Stepping into that, if you want to call it the second level, from being a painter on the first level to becoming an artist on the second level. Painter being technical.
Yeah. Isn't that fun? I mean, it's like following that curiosity. That's what gets me excited to get up in the morning. It's like I want to find out. I don't know. I want to go find out what it's going to be like if I tried it this way or that way. And
what you learn out of those explorations, and I don't even like to call them failures, because they're not. They're
no.
Oh, okay, well, I know not to do that next time. Okay, but I learned that I could do this instead. So it's kind of, they're explorations. They're not failures. If you learn something, it's not a failure.
Absolutely, I totally agree with that. And I think you should even make an exercise to try to fail at a painting and see what happens. Yeah. It's harder than you think.
Yeah, maybe we'll make that a painting challenge.
There you go. Try to make
as
bad a painting as you can, and you see what happens.
I wonder how many people would share it. That would be the real question.
Oh my God, I think that would be really a lot of fun. Let's do it. I'll try to do it.
I think it sounds good.
A really bad painting and see what happens. Well, good laugh at it.
Darn, as hard as I try, I can't make a bad painting. Wouldn't that be fun?
Wouldn't that be great?
We'd probably learn a lot.
You would. I along the line of that, wondering, I was being interviewed by live TV, believe it or not, and the guy stuck his microphone right in my face and said, "What is art?"
Oh my goodness!
Like, oh dear, are you serious? So now, and spontaneously, after in a few minutes, I said, "Well, I think art is a byproduct of your search for what is true, and if you follow that to its conclusion, that means that anything you try along the way with a purity of intention of finding out is art. And so that, you know, the whole trail of evidence along the way of and that's why Van Gogh was such a beautiful example. As I can say that he did 7 years of bad work. They weren't really bad, they were competent. But because his search was so pure, those paintings have soul to them, and they had such personality to them that I would happily own one, you know. Not for the money value, but they're truthful, they're wonderful. But somehow, imagine this: if instead of searching for what is true for yourself as an artist, you only focused on what sold. I'm not going to say any more than that.
Yeah, that's terrible. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Some
of us don't have that problem.
What's that?
Yeah.
I said some of us don't have that problem, but.
Well, listen, I spent 30 years of working for show after show after show, and I'm so grateful for every painting that sells. Yeah. You know, but you know, there's no question about that. That's still the highest honor that anybody can, you know, that I can feel somebody who actually give money for one of my paintings. But but if you get up in the morning and you have an idea, a concept that seems to excite you a little bit in painting, you shouldn't let that go. I mean, that is so important to listen to that, you know. And if you have to do
let that lead you.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have to do 2 paintings that you think will have to sell to pay the bills, do that, but make sure you do the other one too.
Yeah.
And do you find it just to go one step further with the conversation, because there is a lot of pressure on artists at your level to create work that sells, and you know your gallery saying, "Oh, I just sold a snow painting, Quang, so go paint another snow painting." So it you know, I imagine it gets very, very hard for you to go off and experiment and explore on that. You know, find another visual vocabulary that you like, however you want to put it in. It's how do you get yourself out of the way when you're doing that required snow painting?
I don't let anybody require me to do anything.
Okay. That's
so thankfully, I've had really wonderful relationships with every gallery that I've worked with, and they fully understand that I'm always messing around with new concepts, and they'll never know what they're going to get from me. And the honest truth is that in the past, when you sell a $20,000-$30,000 painting or something like that, and somebody wants another one, they say, well, the few times that I've tried that ends up miserable. It ends up not only I feel miserable, the painting is miserable, and it's never worked. And then and other times, when I try to second guess, when I try to do a painting that I think will sell, I've been wrong about that too. And so I've had it happen to me enough now that I know to go ahead and trust that if I do a really good painting, it'll sell. If I do a really good painting, and that means, and that doesn't say, whatever. I haven't done a large still life in a couple of years now, it seems like, and there's a waiting list of like 10 or 15 people for those. But that's not what I'm interested in right now. But when I revisit it, then I'll have all the interest that I want to visit it after wandering around doing all these other things, and it'll be different and it'll be more interesting to me. But So that's the truth. I'm trying to keep I have this friend who's turning 80, and he comes up with the greatest saying. He says, Quang, keep your needs simple and your expectations low. That's the secret to life.
Wow.
I think that's wonderful. So,
Yeah.
And the more of a trap I get myself into, the more I feel like I'll have to paint to keep up with that. But really, I paint if I sell paintings and try to make a living at it, it's in order to buy me time to really paint what I really want to paint. So I better stay on track with that and not get sidetracked.
Oh yeah, that's great. It's a great way to be.
Let's talk a little bit about Courbet. And he was a painter also in the 19th century. And his works have always interested me. And he was a painter, a French painter who led the realist movement. And he was pretty controversial because he rejected the classical and theoretical styles of the French Academy. And his art insisted on the physical reality of an object. So if there were blemishes or, if he was painting a figure and it wasn't the most attractive figure, he wouldn't make it attractive. If there was a blemish on the face, he would put it in. But of course he did mostly landscapes, or at least the ones that I've seen have been landscapes. So we've got Courbet, who's the realist in the early 19th century, and the way that he observed and saw things and painted. And then we have Turner and Monet as well. So, and they all saw differently just in that century. And to me, it's just always amazing that, that those three different, to me, very different ways of seeing all existed in that 19th century. Do you have any thoughts on Courbet's works and how he saw?
Well, I've over the years, I've seen Courbet's works in books and in museums, but they never held my attention all that long. There's a few paintings that were really bold. I remember one big landscape that was really bold and very expressive, and that held my attention for a little bit. But for the most part, he never played much with color. He was not. He didn't look into color the way that Monet did, or he didn't look into atmosphere or the way that Turner did with paint and color and atmosphere and edges and so on. So his work was fairly literal to me, and it didn't have much that held my attention. So, if you look at Courbet's work, his palette was limited to browns and blacks and ochres and so on, not a whole lot. Didn't deviate too much. So in that sense, I didn't feel like he really explored. He didn't explore the visual concept. What you described to me was that he was exploring a personal belief concept, you see. And I think that's cool that he tried to spoke the truth of what he saw. Like, don't hide the blemishes. It's part of reality. But that's not a visual description. That's not shapes or values or color harmonies. You see what I mean?
That's a first level.
It is. It really still is. And that's almost, to me, that's no. Go ahead.
I was going to say, to me, it's almost, we talk about him saying that he's rejecting the classical and theoretical styles. And one of the things that I had read on him was that he actually did paint some things outside. So that I always question how much he actually did develop his eye different from what he was taught in the academy, because we really didn't see the stretch.
Yes. Yeah, I think Courbet is a little bit like this. If, let's say, under the communist regime, where you have to paint happy little workers, and you have to paint, that's one academy, and then you reject that and you start painting anything that is vulgar and whatever that has nothing to do with that. All you did was just slip from one first level to another first level.
Yeah.
But if you took the theme of happy little workers and saw them as beautiful colors and values and shape relationship and transcend the subject, then you're back on the second level. It doesn't matter if you're painting little happy workers or a tree or whatever it is. So I think Courbet might have just rejected one tradition to slide into another first level way of thinking. I don't mean to be harsh on Courbet, but I love what he did, but it didn't. It
wasn't a big enough leap.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is interesting, because if you would compare his work next to Monet and Turner, you certainly would say, he was still in the school, the realist school, the classical theoretical styles. He didn't break free from that. So his influence into, in Turner and Monet, you really couldn't see or couldn't find.
That's right. No, that's exactly right, because he only shifted a mental belief, but not the visual concept too. So nothing changed as far as that goes. You know, he might have been a little bolder with his. Some of his later work, he used a lot of palette knife, and it was a little bit bolder, but there was no understanding about color.
Yeah, certainly seems like there was still fear there.
Theater?
He was fearing fear. Yeah, it's almost like he was fearing making that jump into that transitional point. Turner
I'm not.
And Monet did.
Right. I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's fear or just simply because he didn't understand the way that Turner did. That
sure.
it takes. It's quite something to have a leap like that in an artist's life where you have such a deep realization and can move. But fear certainly will stop it every time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Quang, I'm gonna take a second. We haven't really touched on very many of the questions here. It's been a great discussion, but we've got we've been talking for about an hour and 12 minutes. So are you okay
already?
On time? Uh-huh.
I'm fine. As long as my battery and the phone holds up, I'm okay.
Oh, okay. You can always plug it in. You can be here all night if you want.
Oh, my dear.
So, Blanche, what I'm going to ask you to do is, if there is, and Barbara, if there are questions that we had written down that you really want to get to Quang to answer, I would suggest that we jump into that. We've done a great job of kind of talking a little bit about the past masters, and actually have included Van Gogh in that as well, which was a great discussion. So, Blanche, why don't you go ahead and ask the next question of Quang, and we'll go from there. And I'll keep an eye on the time.
Okay. Yeah. We're running shorter on time than questions that we have here. I'm going to move on to something completely different. Let's talk about the Zen of painting. Follow on what's been said. How do we take ourselves, the technical, the ego side of us, the beliefs we have, and let it happen? Is it developing a trust that it all comes together?
Well, I think I can keep this shorter because we kind of touched on it with the whole question of fear and third level, and that's essentially what it is. I think how we get onto into the Zen part is simply realizing that the other stuff doesn't work. It's to simply realize that the first level just simply does not work, and that's where all the fear is. So you can see that, as soon as you say, oh my God, if you get up to the canvas and you start feeling a reluctancy to do something because and you sense the fear, you just have to make an exercise of just go ahead and doing it. And just to find out, just say, just
the rules
an
are
attitude.
getting away.
Yeah, I just getting an attitude of I wonder what will happen if I did this. I wonder what will happen if I did that. And if you get into an attitude of doing that and challenging yourself, honestly, when I paint, it's always a little bit difficult. Sometimes it flows from the tip of my brush if I can just let it flow, but there's always a sense of struggling with this thing somehow, whether it's the drawing or, and being mindful enough and being with it. But so that's natural. We should always expect that there's always a bit of a challenge, but the challenge is half the fun. But to make sure you have to adopt this attitude of I want to follow this. You got like Joseph Campbell says, follow your bliss. Just follow your interest. And literally for me, Zen is if you try to be Zen, you won't get there. As long as there's trying, you won't get there.
Yeah, you can't think about it.
No, it's just simply a recognition that the other stuff is not true. And so why bother with it?
Yeah.
And then until you stand there with nothing, and then you go.
Well, we'll all be trying to get to that third level somehow.
Don't try, do. Come on now, this is the yoga thing. Don't
That's
try,
right. You can't try. It just happens.
And the last resort, open a bottle of wine.
There you go. Now I have an excuse to drink and paint. This is great.
Oh, absolutely. In moderation, of course.
Of course. Yeah, we don't condone that. We'll be in trouble now.
Right.
Where's that mute button?
It's too late now. Okay.
Yeah, I know. Barbara?
Well, I'm thinking about my personal experience in front of the easel of when, say, and particularly if I'm painting plein air, and that there is sometimes when I'm out there and I'm painting and so much is coming in, and I'm not at that state of grace where it all feels connected and just flowing. And I'm, so what I'm feeling at certain times maybe would be like a little panic or a little anxiety, and then an urge to like solve the problem or get the painting or something like that. And when that happens, the urge is to sometimes just go back to, a technique that maybe solved an earlier problem but has really nothing to do with the present moment or creating something fresh and new and unique. And so I was thinking about, our passion to see and interpret what we see being really at the heart of why we want to create. And yet maybe that urge is unique to each of us. And we've talked so much about kind of not believing the stuff that's not true and getting to that next level and maybe just painting truth. But I think that there's still that place where we need help. And so we've been talking all along about seeing, but maybe in that moment when you're just struggling and getting close to panic, what advice do you have, and how do you kind of stay truthful and develop our eyes to really see?
Yeah, well, let me ask you this. Have you, whenever you, at that point, and you go back to what has worked before, has that always worked?
No, because, what gets me excited is exploring as well and wanting to, I think about something that I read Cézanne saying is wanting to paint a minute of the world's life as it passes, in its truth. And just,
well, I think you bring up a good one. Let's get back to the problem of painting for 1 second and talk about that because what I've been talking about is kind of a philosophical thing, but it encompasses this part of it too, which is the problem of painting. So there's no question when you're standing out there in a landscape, standing there and painting a landscape, and the clouds moving in, the sun's bursting out, and the cloud goes back in, and things are changing everywhere, and you have no idea how to do it, and that's a real problem as an artist. So what it comes down to as a painter, when you're standing there, the only way to solve a painting like that is not so much to fall back on what, in quotes, works, because there isn't anything that works other than understanding. So when you stand in that landscape, there's little chance that you can do a good landscape painting unless you understand what you're looking at. You see what I mean? So the problem of painting a landscape, when I teach a workshop, I taught one down in Nashville right after Indianapolis, and I had a wonderful group of artists. And the whole time, it was so simple because we had beautiful sunny days. I just showed them how to paint, how to see shadow and light. All my demonstrations were standing, whatever landscape I'm standing in front of, complex or simple, a barn or trees or whatever. I brought it down to a simple thing. Everything you see in front of you is either in the light or it's not being hit by the light, it's in the shadow. It's that simple, right? That's bringing it down to the barest, basic set of clear understanding about what you're looking at, so that when you go to paint that tree, you're not painting a tree, you're painting what's in the shadow, and then you're painting what's in light. And then you see this grass area, you see that grass, but you don't say, well, what green is that grass? You're saying that grass is in the light, and it has this effect against that area which is in shadow. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
if you can get it down to simple concepts like that,
Okay.
then you have much better chance of succeeding in the painting. Now, what happens if the cloud blows over and the sun is blocked out? Then at that point, and that's why in my videos I'm doing, and that's actually the next thing I'm going to do. I produce those 3 DVDs, but my next DVD, what I've been thinking about for a year, is a set of videos on painting the landscape. And,
that'd be great.
On it,
Yeah.
because, the landscape is so interesting. But if the cloud falls over, if the clouds draw over and blocks the sun, then that principle no longer applies, because there's no shadow and there's no light. Clearly, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's when we go into this realm that I call a visual concept that I call local tone, or painting based on tonal relationships. So what happens when the sun is blocked out, and then you get a cloudy day, you basically see the actual tone or color or value, they call it local color or local value, of any particular thing that you look at without the effect of shadow and light on it. And that's essentially what Van Gogh was painting. He was painting, just local tone, value against value, color against color. So however you start your landscape painting, it has to be clear in the end which of those 2 things you're speaking about. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So if you're stuck in the middle, you're in deep trouble.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a great answer.
Yeah, so it's understanding. There's no way of getting around it. And so, and there are wonderful DVDs and things out that you can. I was never good at reading a art book, and getting that kind of information from them. But when I watch somebody paint or hear them or ask questions, you might get that. I've never heard anybody talk about light and shadow versus local tone before, as concept in painting, other than my mentor, who was this gypsy guy. Nobody knew about him, and he, to this day, I've not met anybody who's as brilliant as Rennie Bruin talking about this. So, but
and your DVDs, when you explain those 2 approaches, one with the interior and the other one with the still life, and then in the nuts and bolts when you did the light and shadow, kind of like a guy from Rembrandt's era, you explained it so beautifully, and then you could just see, there is a little light and shadow in this figure in the interior, but that's not what I'm focusing on. This is I'm looking at the values playing against each other, and that was really, really, really good.
Oh well, thank you. We if we start down, I talk about the different eight different visual approaches in those DVDs, and if we go into it now, it'll take all day. But you can see that each one, light and shadow, is only one of the 8 visual ideas. So, Rembrandt spent his whole life painting shadow and light. Van Gogh painted local tone. He wasn't a good painter until he did that. Well, Fession is a local tone painter. So is Degas. So is Richard Diebenkorn, Wolf Kahn. Those are... And then you have visualization and color. I mean, it would take too long to go into that. But the point here is that there's no great work without intention visually. So all the great works of all the great artists always end up having a very clear visual intention, and before they can really make art. And so it's important as an artist to understand these concepts, to understand what it is that you look at and what it is that excites you and what it is that you're trying to say ultimately with line shapes, color, texture, edges, and not just think, I'm trying to get that landscape. That doesn't mean anything,
Yeah, the subject matter doesn't matter. Excuse me.
And sorry, I think one more point is that what you said about going back to relying on something that you feel would work, whatever that means. Well, I'm not sure what you meant by that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think philosophically, that doesn't ring true to me, because truth, what works is always in the moment. When I go back on something, it can become like a cheap technique or something like that. That this is personal. It's like saying, well, I used black for the background before and it works, so I'm going to do it again. You know what I mean? And after a while, all your paintings have black backgrounds, and you put yourself right into a corner. Whereas if you explore with each painting, I wonder what would happen if I did this, and just give yourself that permission to go into that. I think you're gonna. I know you develop much faster as an artist, and you'll end up learning things as an artist that you wouldn't learn if you didn't try it.
Yeah, that is a great answer.
Thank you.
And I think what I meant was more like, I try to never be a formula painter where you have one solution and you just keep approaching the same painting the same way, and instead just see, like for a landscape, I do start out looking at light and shadow and shapes of light and shadow, and that's what I'm seeing. But I can get to a place and go, whoa, well, what is that? And it's easy to, if you're not staying aware, to fall back into what you described as that first level of seeing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. That's more assumption. That's what it is. You're assuming that that's going to work again, and that's just more assumption.
Mhm. Yeah.
And it may or may not produce a result, but it's not interesting result.
Right.
Ultimately.
So I'm curious, Quang, if we looked at your 3 levels that you were talking about on painting, the one where we were just talking about the stepping from the first level to the second level to the third level, does that tie into the number of years that you have been painting as well? You understand what I'm getting at?
Not quite.
So if I'm a painter that's just starting out at the beginning, I'm naturally going to be on level 1 for a certain number of years. And then, maybe 10 years from now, I start asking the questions that I need to ask to get me to the second level. Or have you actually seen where people can make that jump in a shorter period of time? Some artists, that kind of.
Oh, yeah.
There's no real formula.
I expect you to be on it tomorrow, because now that you know about it.
Now that we know, we have
a lot of paintings, and you're not going to have a discussion.
Oh no question.
I'll send samples to Quang tomorrow. Yeah.
Oh, if it doesn't happen now, it's not worth anything. No, I think that I've had some amazing experiences with artists who painted for however long, and they come to me now. I just say something, and then it's transformative instantly. I've had this happen a few times. Some really good artists actually, and they just didn't see. They had been skirting around it visually and doing things that look good, but they never heard it put concretely like that. And once you have that, and you go, oh. It's as simple. It's no different. Take this as an example. Rembrandt, if you look at him, he lived the same time as Leonardo da Vinci. While da Vinci was in Italy doing the Mona Lisa, Rembrandt was over there painting light and shadow. Da Vinci didn't know about light and shadow. And up to the point where people were painting, artists were painting for centuries, up to the time of Rembrandt, and nobody understood light and shadow the way that he did. And light and shadow, I can explain to you almost like a scientific formula. There's basically 6 points to light and shadow, 7 points. There's you have one source of light, first of all. When it hits an object, you have a light side and a shadow side. That's 2. You have that object's going to cast a shadow. That's 3, right? and it's going to have a highlight. The highlight is the thing that reflects the light source. That's 4. The object, as it turns away from the light source and turning toward the shadow, but still in the light, so it's not as washed out. That's called a halftone. That's 5. And in the shadow, the things, the room, depending on how light the room is, or the things, objects, or whatever is reflecting light back into the shadow, you're going to get reflected light into the shadow, right? That's 6. And then you have the area where the reflected light doesn't get to and the light source can't get to in the shadow. That's the core shadow. That's the truest value of shadow. It's scientific. It's real logical. And yet, before Rembrandt really broke it down, nobody really painted it in a logical way like that. And now I could talk to a 8-year-old, 10-year-old about that, or an artist who's been painting possibly for a number of years without understanding that. You can explain that to them all of a sudden. Oh, you would never make the same mistake again. And the mistake is like when I was in high school, I asked my art teacher, I said, Mr. Bao, how do you shade something? I didn't know how I could draw well, but I didn't understand about shading. And he said, well, that's just something you'll learn as you go along. He didn't know the answer, right? So, but had somebody showed me the light and shadow concept in 5 minutes, it would have changed the way I had drawn. I would have drawn everything and anything from that point on. You see? Right. So for me, the difference in the different levels of understanding is that, okay, you can't just know that when you're on the first level, you're going to be afraid to make a mistake. And you're not going to be trying to figure out how things work. You're just constantly afraid of doing something wrong. And you're thinking about the object. But on the second level, you can start thinking like, how does that color fit against that color? Or how does that value react against that value if I did this? Well, what if I put that edge out softer and make this one sharper? Let's find out. That's when you're on the second level. You're just finding out, Right. Mm-hmm. And then on that third level, which is something that is, at that point you don't worry about anything. You just do it. That's really the fun part.
Yeah.
Well, we ought to. Go ahead, Blanche.
Oh, I was going to say we ought to all be able to paint on the second level now that we understand it. Right?
At least you should go there. You should go there for sure. Find out. Find out. That's fun.
Yeah.
But you always have to keep practicing. Your drawing is, and all of that. It's like musicians. These great musicians, the soloists, they'll practice 4 or 5 hours a day, and you just have to practice your scales, and you still have to do that. But as artists, you still put in a ton of hours doing that. But on top of that, you can put on top of it this beautiful visual intention too, and it will propel you to better work in a much shorter time than if you just trying to cling on to these rules and things that make you afraid to paint.
Yeah, one of the things that I've been finding myself is I've actually had some time to paint now, and one of the things that it's like, I just don't want to go downstairs and paint, so I tend to try to create things that I want to paint in my mind. And I'm not talking about any abstract stuff. It is a painting that I wanted to create and how I want it. I actually painted in my mind before I even walk into my studio. And if I don't have that vision in my mind beforehand, I don't go to my studio. Because it's not fun for me. Well, it's not fun for me. If I'm down there fighting it, it's not fun. And I've decided that since I have this time, what I want to do is actually have fun painting again. Because the fun, I lost some of the fun, and I want to get that back. So this was kind of my way of it being mine. I'm going to own it. I'm going to create it in my mind. I'm going to visually paint it in my mind, and then I'm going to put it down, on the canvas. So, and I've been having a lot more fun with that than I've had in previous years. So,
well, that's a different concept than what I think about. But let me ask you: is that what is in your mind? You're talking about a visually in your mind, how all the you worked out all the value color relationships already, or is it a theme idea, like I'm going to paint somebody walking in the field or whatever? Do you see it visually, the concept?
I start with the theme and what I want to paint. Like today, while I was teaching, one of the things is I sat down and I said, okay, I want to take a bridge that I know that I have photo reference from that's down in New Zealand, and I want to put a figure on that bridge. So I just started playing with that in my mind and started sketching out, doodling out what that is in my sketchbook and how I want it to go. And then from there, I start working out color relationships and values all in my mind beforehand and try to capture that as much as I can. And then I start out with a grayscale painting of what I want to make sure the drawing's correct on the actual canvas, and then I go into starting to apply the color relationships. And that's what's been making it more fun for me.
Yeah, that does sound like fun. And so you're not, at that point, you're really not following the photograph for color or values anymore, is that what you're saying?
That's correct. So the only thing I use my photo reference for, or any reference for, is for drawing detail, to make sure that I've got the drawing detail correct.
Brilliant. That's great.
Then I put it away and I say, talk to me, tell me what color this should be, what color am I seeing, and I start working with color relationships.
Yeah, fun. That sounds great to me.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah.
So I had to find some way to get fun back in. So.
Oh yeah.
For me.
Oh, try scraping it. You'll love it.
Yeah. Not afraid of failing, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, that the reason why that came up, and because you know how everybody's done a bad painting and they get frustrated and they wipe it off, and as soon as you do, it looks great, right?
Yeah.
Why is that? So I had to find out. There's something about it. You do that, and it pulls everything together, and
yeah, it does. It does. It softens things, and it's still there, but not totally.
Yeah, there's great mud colors that are in there. All right, Quang, I need to say thank you very much. We actually have kept you past the 90-minute time that I said we would have you on the air.
No worries.
I think it's been a wonderful conversation. Go ahead. You were going to say something.
Great. I enjoyed it. No, it's been fun. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah, well, we enjoyed having you here, and hopefully we'll have you back again, because I think we got like maybe 2 pages worth of questions that we didn't get to, or a page maybe.
Sure, yeah, I'd be happy to come back and talk about some other things. There's so much to cover with painting.
Well, Quang, it's been incredibly enlightening and inspiring to hear your point of view and how you describe things. It makes it all come alive.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
You bet. Anything else that we can?
Go ahead, I'm sorry. Go ahead, sir.
No. It's no. I was going to say, is there anything else that I could answer? But
well, what I was going to do is give you the opportunity to talk about what you have coming up. Do you have any workshops or any shows or anything that you'd like to mention to the folks that are listening, so that they can come and see your work?
Oh, well, actually, on the whole thing about exploring painting, last year I tried to take a sabbatical so that I'm not distracted by all of that, to focus on exploring painting in a deeper way, and I stumped at sabbatical, so I'm trying it again this year. So I'm going to take a year off from accepting any more deadlines and so on and so forth, and just see if I can paint. Just see what I can do with it, just to spend months on a painting if I have to, or a few days, or scrape a painting if I want to. So, but the main thing I'm working on, besides the 3 DVDs that I've produced, and I go much deeper into these 8 visual approaches and so on, obviously, which are on my website at quangho.com. But I'm going to work on 2 things this year, and that is the DVD for landscape painting, and possibly painting the nude in light and shadow. Somebody had asked me to do that, and that might be interesting. And and then let me see what other thing. There's this other thing that I'm working on. I have two sisters who are still in Vietnam, and one of my sisters told me this story how she and two other friends collected $50, and they just with $50, and they went around and they gave money to these orphanages in Vietnam that are kind of under the radar. And I said, what is this? Why didn't you tell me about this? And my sister was a school teacher, one of the most beautiful human beings. She's really sweet, and she said, well, why should I tell you about it? But $50, she's able to get some school supplies and help these. Basically, they're single women, older women who have taken in orphanage kids from the street and raised them in their own homes. And there's a number of them around the country, around this way. So I wanted to help. So I have a painting that's on if you go to my website, there's a painting right on the front cover right now of a woman cooking. And I was going to do a little fundraiser for her and try to, like if somebody donates $100, I'm going to keep the name in a basket and until some months down the line and draw a winner out for that painting, and then take the money and give it to my sister to do some work over there now that she's retired. So if she can be trusted with $50, I figured if whatever money I raised, I'll have a great time giving it out to these people, you know. So that's the next thing I'm working on.
That's wonderful. That's great.
When you
pardon?
When you have all the details, or you and I can work that offline, I'll get the details, and we'll put that out on a blog on my website and stuff too, so we can tie that in to this as well.
Oh, that would be great. That would be great fun.
Yeah.
And I mentioned this to a few other artists, and they all want to jump on board. And then the last thing is I'm going to be working on currently for a year now. I'm working on a book about some of these philosophies and some of my paintings and the story of coming over to America and all of that. So hopefully within about a year I'll have that out.
Okay. Well, great.
So,
this doesn't sound like a sabbatical year for you either. So
no, it doesn't.
Yeah. Well, but there's no deadline for them, see, so I just do it whenever I feel like it.
That's true. Yeah.
And then number 4 is golf, right?
Number 4, my golf game sufferings. I better get to work on that too, yes.
Well, if you play Weatherwax again, you have to call me. So.
What's that now?
As if you play Weatherwax again, you have to call me.
Oh, yes. Are you near there?
Yeah, I live right by there, actually.
Oh, no kidding. That's one of my favorite golf courses in Cincinnati, Weatherwax. All right, you're on.
Yep, and then if you do come, we'll, depending on whether or not, I used to belong to another club up here. It was called Wildwood, which is actually a wonderful course, too. So if we can do Weatherwax one day and Wildwood the next. So.
Oh, boy, that sounds, I've never seen a golf course I haven't liked. So it'll be easy.
Yeah. All right. Well, again, thank you. It's been a pleasure. It's been an honor. And both Blanche and Barbara and myself, are just excited and happy that you've been here. I think the conversation tonight has been absolutely wonderful, and want to thank all of our listeners who have been listening. And again, like I said, we definitely want to have you back on the show again in the future, and I know I'll be in touch with you. So thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Linda and Blanche and Barbara. That's been great fun to tell. Anytime, let me know. And Happy New Year to everybody. And just remember to have a ton of fun painting. Remember, whatever you decide, if you make a decision, it's always correct. Go with it.
Okay.
All right.
Be fearless.
Best to you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thank you, Quang.
Thank you.
Okay. Good night, everyone. Have a good evening, and please feel free to share the link to Quang's this episode. It will be live and on demand in probably about 5 minutes as soon as we're off the air. So thank you, everyone, and have a good evening. And the next show will be in February with Ken Bacchus. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you later. Bye.